Um, I'm so glad to be here with you all. I miss you. I can't wait for the day that we can be in that beautiful sanctuary together. But for now, this will do. I'm going to begin by sharing a story of the making of a movie called The Greatest Story Ever Told. Old movie. One of the actors in the movie was John Wayne. And he was playing a Roman centurion, right? It's a story of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? He was playing a Roman centurion, and he had a line in which he had to say, "He is truly the Son of God." And it is said that the director wanted John Wayne to express more emotion, more wonder in those words. And so he said to John Wayne, "Put more awe into it." And John Wayne said, "Oh, he truly is the Son of God." In other words, he misinterpreted, said, "Ah," right? He just added that. Anyway, good morning. God bless you. I am excited about sharing this message here today because I've had a recent healing and an inspiration in my relationship to the Christian cross as a symbol. Okay. I attended a Catholic Mass recently, and on the day I attended, the priest announced that this was the day of the feast of the Exaltation of the cross. All right, the feast of the Exaltation of the cross. When I heard that, I said, "Wow, that seems a little over the top. The feast of the Exaltation of the cross." It just seemed like way over the top. But hey, you got to be open and receptive. So I sat there and I was open. And as I heard the homily, I really did have an opening, like a healing, or like I say, I also got some inspiration. I want to share that with you today. So I've had a little bit of a journey with this Christian symbol of the cross. Maybe that's not your situation, but it's been mine. I think from childhood, but some of the notable moments in my life was when I was in ministerial schools, a two-year residential program, right? It's a change now, but that's the way it was when I went through school. And we had every 6 months a revision called the Licensing and Ordination Committee come in and question and kind of do like a verbal exam of the students to see if they were on track to become unity ministers. And like I say, we had 4 of these every 6 months over 2 years. And I was facing now the final, what we called L&O, License and Ordination Team. This is about 3 or 4 different unity ministers from the field that came in to make up one of the teams. And for ordination, I had to go through 2 of these processes, interviews, questions, right? And on the second one of the ministers asked me a question about the cross, the resurrection, the crucifixion, and somehow I either misunderstood, I didn't answer correctly. We got into this thing between us where she kept asking and I kept responding, but it was not the right answer. And we got into a tumble. It was a mess. In fact, it was such a mess that my ordination was put into question. And, there was some discussion and this or that. It was decided then that I would have a third interview, which the third interview is not what you want, right? Because there's some real questions about you becoming a minister. So I had the third interview and I actually, went on, thank you God, became ordained. But I did have that challenge there regarding the cross. Then my first assignment as a unity minister, I was an associate minister in Puerto Rico, large church here in Puerto Rico. And I remember I had a hospital visit and I went to the hospital and in one of the waiting rooms there, I noticed on the cross, on the wall, they had a cross with Jesus on the cross. And of course he was in that suffering mode. And suddenly I had this reaction. I said to myself, how can they put this symbol of suffering in a place, in a hospital that's meant for healing? It seems totally counterproductive, right? You got this symbol of suffering and pain and death sitting right there on the wall when it should be a symbol of life and resurrection and all that. Anyway, time went on. I ended up having my own ministry in Costa Rica. Some of you know about that. And I remember one day as we're there, this woman came in very proudly, right? And she wanted to gift something to the church. And she gifted us this huge cross, right? It had a stand and you'd put it there and you'd put it on a table or something, and this huge cross with Jesus hung on it. And, you know, you try to be gracious when somebody gives you something, but it really wasn't a reflection of my own theology. Like I say, I had this issue about that. And, you know, I ended up explaining to the woman that we were grateful for her gift, but that really that symbol was not the symbol that we were trying to communicate in this ministry. Well, time passes, right? And many years later, I find myself caring for my mother as she was getting elderly and taking the best care I could of her in my home. And she had the habit of wearing a cross around her neck, right? And after she made her transition, after she died, I decided I would take that cross and I would wear that cross. In fact, I'm wearing it here today, right? I'm pulling it out from under my shirt so that you can see it. And so suddenly, you know, some years ago, she died about 3 years ago, I became a person wearing a cross. Can you imagine, right? And I justified it because I said, you know, whatever, you know, symbol that is, it's in honor of my mother. I'm going to wear it in honor of my mother. Wanted to feel her presence with me, right? And then, of course, I went to this mass recently, to the Exaltation, the feast of the Exaltation of the cross. And in that homily, the priest said that, of course, in the time that Jesus walked the earth, that cross that they used to crucify was a symbol of pain, of humiliation, of death, and of suffering, right? But over time, the Christian faith has taken that symbol and transformed it. And the beautiful thing is that they transformed that symbol of the cross into hope, into life, into faith, into salvation, into freedom, right? And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Of course, whenever that magic word transformation is said, you know, I always perk up my ears and I said, well, you know, there must be some wonderful metaphysical truth in this transformation, this change of perception from an instrument of pain and suffering and death to a symbol of life and freedom, right? And so that's why Beverly does such a beautiful job of reading that scripture from Numbers today, that story of Moses, right? Out there in the desert with the Jewish people, and they're all angry at him because they don't like the food. They've been wandering out there, they're lost in the desert, and they come and they speak against them, says, you're no good, God's no good, right? And then God sends them these poisonous serpents and they start dying. They say, oh, oy vey, right? They say, oy vey. Oh, Moses, we've spoken badly against you and about God. Please pray that God would save us. God prays to the God, and God says to him, the Lord says to him, make yourself an image of the serpent, put it up on a pole, and anybody who looks at the serpent will not die. So he does that, and that's what happens. They put this bronze serpent up on a pole. Anybody who gets bitten looks on that and does not die, but lives. And so again, the serpent, the poisonous serpent, which was an instrument of pain and death, right? Made into a bronze image, set up on a pole, right? Higher, lift the consciousness, people looking at it, now becomes a symbol of freedom and healing. And so there is some wonderful metaphysical truth on that. When people lifted up their eyes, raised up in consciousness, they understood that the poison in the snake had no power over them. I'll repeat that the poison in the snake had no power over them. And that's the metaphysical truth that I'd like to explore with you today. Because what we need to ask ourselves is, okay, that's an interesting story, but how does it apply in my life? Well, let's just ask ourselves, what is our burden? What is our cross? What is our challenge? Right? What are we holding inside ourselves? What is the source of your suffering, your sadness, your worry, your fear, the ache that you have? Right? If you take a moment to think about it, you could probably make a short list or maybe a long list of challenges and burdens and crosses that you're bearing. Right? For me recently, I had in April when we all submit our taxes, I had asked for an extension, and recently I put all the numbers together and submitted, right, my taxes, and I was amazed and surprised to see that the tax burden that I had taken on for last year. Thank God I had made good income, but it seemed like I also had a pretty sharp tax bite. And it was wow, it was huge. I mean, it felt like that those taxes were like biting me like that poisonous snake. And I felt like, oh, how am I going to pay this? I got to, I got real worried. I got fearful about it. It's like, I felt like, choked. I was being choked by the prospect of that. And then I, as I was facing that and I was thinking about this healing, about the cross, I just remembered the story of the cross. I just want to remind you what that's all about, right? Before the crucifixion, Jesus said to the people, he said, take up your cross and follow me. Now, sometimes people talk about that and they use it to say, well, we need to somehow glorify suffering. In Unity, we reject that totally because we understand that what Jesus meant by that, take up your cross and follow me, is to not follow me to the suffering, but follow me through the suffering to the resurrection, to the new expression of life, right? To the overcoming of that crucifixion. That's what he meant. Follow me all the way through, right? And ultimately, that's what Jesus did. He demonstrated that whatever we fear, right, ultimately has no power over us. The only power it has is the power that we give it. And we remember also that Jesus chose the path of the cross. We know that he could have escaped. He could have gone up into the mountains with his disciples. He could have lived to a ripe old age. He didn't need to go through that. He chose it. And you got to ask yourselves why. What was it that he needed to do in that experience? Well, it seems pretty clear that what he needed to do was to continue in the journey that he had begun. And the journey led him to this ultimate demonstration, a demonstration in which he needed to demonstrate to himself and to the rest of the world that even death has no power over us. It's a powerful lesson. The message, the central message of the crucifixion is you can overcome the cross. Now that may be our first truth bomb of the day. You can overcome the cross. Bam. We forget that sometimes. Overcome the suffering. And so the next question is, well, how do we do that? And what's beautiful is that story of Moses in the book of Numbers has a lot of clues for us, right? Remember, the snakes are biting us with poison. The people, they recognize what's going on. They complained, they kvetched, they'd spoken out against God and Moses. And then they rethink the thing. They said, oh, we've made a mistake. We've spoken out against you and against the Lord. Please forgive us and please help us. Call for help. And this is where Moses takes on that process of getting the bronze serpent, putting it up on a pole again, raising the consciousness and having that be a healing instrument rather than an instrument of death. So here's the truth bomb for today. In order to overcome our suffering, we need to take care of it and not run away from it. Oh, in order to overcome our suffering, we need to take care of it and not run away from it, because that's the tendency. We want to turn away from it. We want to run away from it. So let me break it down a little bit with the story of Moses and what we're trying to teach today. I think the central lesson there is that we need to identify and acknowledge our suffering. Rather than run away from it, we need to face it head on. Now that seems like the last thing that we want to do, right? But that's absolutely where we need to be. We need to be where we are. And if we can admit to ourselves that we are suffering, then we have a chance of transforming it. It's not until we come into that realization and to that acceptance of that state that we have the opportunity of going beyond it, right? We need to be where we are in order to transform what is. So that is the first thing. Realize that the people out there in the desert, they recognized, they knew very clearly that the snakes were the source of their problem, right? Well, we need to acknowledge what is the source, what is the source of your crucifixion experience, your suffering, your fear, your worry, your burden, right? And then, of course, comes this moment of meditation. Now, meditation is the most powerful tool that we have. Why? Because it changes our perception, and that's what we need to do. We need to change our perception as being victims of the source of suffering, to once again claim our divine power. I like to understand meditation like that story of the man in jail. The story is told that there was once a man who was born in jail, and he had never been outside, right? Never seen sunshine. And he lived in that jail, and to him, that was his world, right? And if somebody were to come up to him and say, man, you're in a terrible state of mind. I mean, you're in a terrible place to be, you must be doing a lot of suffering. He'd say, what do you mean suffering? This is life. This is the way it is. He doesn't know any different, right? That's his world. One day, he discovers a secret tunnel, and the secret tunnel takes him out to the sunlight and to the beauty of the entire world. And so he now understood a whole new dimension of life. And that is what meditation is all about, right? A good meditation will take us from where we are through a tunnel to an expansive, beautiful experience of our being. Now, meditation is not designed to develop pleasure. That's not the intention. But it's to understand the truth of suffering. Boom, that's another truth bomb. It's to understand the truth of suffering. We understand that suffering, again, is self-imposed. So the thought that you are in trouble, that like me with my taxes, got me by the throat, biting me like a snake, right? I'm not in trouble. It takes the thought of I'm in trouble and it's removed, it's changed, it's transformed. Thank you, God. So that's what it's all about, meditation. And then, of course, notice in the story, express compassion. Be good to yourself. And when you face that burden, that fear, that worry, you have to treat yourself with kindness, with love. Boy, I'm really fearful about this situation. It's really bothering me. It's really weighing me down. It's got me by the throat, whatever it is. But I'm going to do my very best here. I know I have the resource. In the back of my mind, I remember that God's presence is with me. Maybe I don't feel it right now, but boy, I'm just going to really trust. I'm going to go back to that meditation experience, get a new vision. I'm going to treat myself with kindness, with grace, with compassion. And once we've acknowledged, once we've meditated, once we've expressed some compassion, then we pull out of our unity toolbox our prayer. And you remember, just like Tanya said today, we use denials and affirmations. That's our unity prayer process. We don't deny the situation. We don't deny that it hurts, that it bothers me, that it chokes me, that it bites me. We deny that it has power over us. Boom, denial. And once we take its power away, then we claim our power with an affirmative stance that says, I have a creative solution for this. God and I are one, and I know I'm going to get through this. And we start opening the channels of some creative solutions to be set up. So notice what this story in Numbers teaches us. Identify and acknowledge our suffering. Meditate, get beyond it. Get into that open freedom state of mind. Some compassion towards yourself. And then boom, that powerful prayer process. Deny that it has any power over you. And put that snake up on a stick. See that it has no power over you. Right? And declare that you have a creative solution to get through this. And this is how the cross, which is initially a symbol of pain and suffering and humiliation and torture, becomes an instrument of healing. Now, in the city of Hiroshima in Japan, you know that that's where the United States dropped an atomic bomb. The story is that after the bomb was dropped and some time had passed, in the town of Hiroshima, there was this big empty field where the bomb had fallen. And nobody wanted to go there. Nobody wanted to do anything. It was just empty field with this hole in it, right? And they left it alone. They hadn't done anything with it. Well, eventually the people started saying, we don't like seeing that hole. We got to do something with that space. We just can't let it sit there all the time. And, they were trying to think of how to move on from that whole experience. And it said that they had a town meeting. And in the town meeting, people were complaining about it and that it's ugly and that it reminds them of the 140,000 people that died at that time, right? It's 1945, right, that happened. Well, it turns out that somebody in that meeting got very creative. And they said, I've noticed that some people like to come to our town and actually visit that spot. He says, why don't we take advantage of that? And let's build a memorial. And let's make it really nice so that people from around the world can come and visit this. And so today, in Hiroshima, Japan, stands the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. And it says that it receives 1 million visitors a year. Brings 1 million visitors a year. Of course, with the visitors come prosperity. And so you see this town took this symbol of pain, of hate, of death, of destruction, and transformed it by looking at it, by knowing that it had no power over them anymore, by getting creative, having some compassion into something that is serving them and the world, right? Now, I told you about my taxes. I think the smartest thing that I did when I acknowledged that I was really, really feeling the bite, I think the smartest thing I did was talk to my wife about it. And she got creative right away. She says, all right, let's just sit down. We got to sit down with paper and pencil. We started doing budget. We realized, hey, we're spending a lot of money on these Starbucks, on this Dunkin' Donuts. We can save over here. We can save over here. We can put this over here. We can put this over here. And boom, we came up with a creative strategy to handle that debt. It was a beautiful thing, right? And it actually lifted us up. And so once again, by facing it, by facing that instrument of suffering, was transformed now into an instrument of healing. Right? So once again, Moses put that snake up on the pole so that people would look at it. Don't turn away from your suffering. Face it directly. Acknowledge, identify it. Right? Realize where you are in consciousness. Pull out the power of meditation. Let it be an instrument to remind you of who and what you are. You're not that guy who was born in jail. You are the one who found the tunnel and live in the light. Express some compassion to yourself. Boy, this really hurts. This is really burdensome. But I know that I'm going to make it. I have the strength, the resources, the intelligence to get through this. Pull out your prayer. Deny that that suffering has any power over you, and be open to affirming, I have a creative solution. I am the creative solution. I know that I will find a path to get through. So, dear brothers and sisters of Unity in Brooklyn, this is how we take the cross. Once an instrument of pain, of suffering, of death, and transform it into a symbol of healing. God bless you all. I love you. Hope to see you again soon.